Hello everyone and welcome back to Classic Comics. This is my review of the 10th episode of Star Trek Picard Season 1, Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2. So, after he was set free by Sutra last episode, Narek goes to the Borg Cube and meets up with his sister, Narissa. Meanwhile, on the Siren, which is crash-landed on the planet last episode and still isn't functioning, Rios makes some repairs and gets it running again. Narek finds the Siren and tells the crew he has a plan to stop the beacon, which the synths are building to summon this mysterious ancient race of advanced synths that will help defeat the Romulans. Basically, the plan is to go to the synth village under the guise of bringing Narek to them as a prisoner, and sneak a bomb into the village inside a soccer ball, then use that to blow up the beacon. While they're doing this, Soong discovers that Sutra was responsible for the murder of the synth last episode. Now the plan works, and they get into the synth village with Narek. Soong finds them and agrees to help them carry out their plans. He confronts Sutra and deactivates her. And then they try to destroy the beacon that Soji is building, but so she throws the bomb away and it explodes harmlessly. Meanwhile, Picard and Agnes take the Siren into orbit to try and delay the Romulan fleet long enough for Starfleet to arrive. On the Borg Cube, Narissa sees the Siren above the planet and targets them to try to destroy them, but Seven arrives and stops her. They have a fight, and then Seven throws her from a great height, and she dies, I guess. Up above the planet, the synths have released some more of those giant space flowers to attack the Romulans, but things aren't going well. The flowers are being destroyed, so Agnes creates a holographic illusion of dozens of ships, copied from the Siren, to trick the Romulans into thinking there's a whole fleet of ships. The Romulans target the holographic ships, but it doesn't fool them for long. It does fool them long enough, however, for a Federation fleet to arrive, led by Captain Riker, who warns the Romulans that they will defend the planet if the Romulans attack. And so there's kind of a standoff taking place. Now Soji activates the beacon and it creates a portal. And then some kind of mechanical tentacles start to emerge from the portal. Then Picard pleads with Soji to shut the portal down, and then, well, she's like, okay, and she just does. Never mind that she hadn't listened to him before, but okay, whatever. And then Picard begins to die. Soji beams Picard and Agnes from the ship to the synth village, and everyone gets very teary-eyed as he dies. Then he wakes up back in his home and thinks that it was all a dream, but then Data appears and tells him that he died, but his consciousness was downloaded into a computer simulation. So Picard's mind is then transferred into a synth body so that he will survive. And Agnes tells him that an aging algorithm was written for his new body so that he will age as he would have if he didn't have the Irematic syndrome. I'm not sure I would want my brain downloaded into an artificial body, but if I did, I don't think I would want it to just keep aging like a normal human body. Wouldn't that be one of the main selling points of having an artificial body? That it doesn't age like an organic body? Whatever. Then Picard grants Data's request and terminates Data's simulated consciousness so that Data dies. And then at the end, we see that the crew is back on board the Siren, and Agnes is there, and she obviously isn't going to pay any penalty for murdering Maddox. And Seven and Rafi are apparently lesbians now, and they're a thing because, of course, why not? And then they fly off to have more adventures, presumably just as nonsensical as this one was. So, what to make of Star Trek Picard after the first season? Well, it's marginally better than Star Trek Discovery, just barely, but it suffers from some of the same problems. First of all, the writing just isn't all that good. Apparently the show went through some significant rewrites, and it shows. If you will recall, when this series was in development, Patrick Stewart gave interviews where he mentioned that his inspiration for doing this series was to do something along the lines of Logan, but with Captain Picard. Now, in Logan, Wolverine, who's grown old and is dying from an illness, meets a young girl who's in danger, and Logan needs to protect her. It eventually is discovered that she is in fact a clone of Logan. I suspect that that's what the original plot for the show was. Dodge and Soji were going to be clones of Picard, not Riker, presumably made from tissue that was taken from him by the Borg when he was Locutus, maybe. This would help explain the Borg's presence in the story. My guess is that this version was shown to test audiences and didn't test well, so rewrites and reshoots were done, just like Star Trek Discovery, Kurtzman's other Star Trek show. Now, remember when Stewart was saying that the rest of the Next Gen crew wouldn't be in his new show, but then Data and Troy and Riker all wind up appearing anyway? Much like how, when Star Trek Disco was announced, Kurtzman and other people working on the show said that Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise wouldn't show up either. But then Spock and the Enterprise appear in the second season. And Star Trek Disco went through a lot of reshoots in both its first and second seasons also. So yeah, I think the original plot involved Picard meeting Dodge Soji, and maybe there was only one of them originally instead of a pair of twins. Who knows? I'm guessing the Romulans were going to try to find her and exploit her in some way, which might explain the Romulans working on the captured Borg cube. But in the reshoots, more elements from Next Gen were brought in, and Dodge Soji became clones of Data, even though the explanation of how she was cloned doesn't make any friggin' sense. They cloned Data's brain from a single positron, a single subatomic particle. But that doesn't make any sense. You can clone someone from a single cell because each cell in our body contains a complete copy of our DNA, a blueprint of the larger whole. A positron just has a positive electronic charge. That would be very much like using a single electron to duplicate a computer database or program. We don't do that in the real world because it wouldn't work. A positron is part of the larger whole, but it doesn't contain a copy of the whole, the way a human cell does. Also, we keep hearing that Soji has a positronic brain like Data, yet she's also flesh and blood, apparently. If she's a clone and Data supplied her brain, then where did the material for her body come from? Also, we're told that Soji and Dodge were created by Bruce Maddox. We see in Soji's memories that she and Dodge were created by Maddox, and that they were on a world with 2 moons in the sky and electrical storms. We learn that this world is the home of a community of synths created by Maddox and Noonien Sung's son, Alton Sung. Now, if there was a world where synths have a refuge to hide from organic beings who might be hostile to them, then why are Dodge and Soji on Earth and on the Borg cube, respectively, living and working and under the belief that they're really human and have a bunch of fake memories? They even have a fake mother that they can call and talk to. But who is this mother? Is she someone that was hired by Maddox just to play the role of their mother in order to further the illusion that they're human? Why would you do that? Is she an AI of some kind? Again, why? What's the point? Why does Soji start to fall asleep whenever she speaks to her mother? Why did Maddox take them away from Capellius, the world the synths are hiding on in the first place? It seems like they had a safe refuge there. Why take them away from that? And why fool Dodge and Soji into believing that they're not androids but really human? It doesn't make any frickin' sense. The show starts out as an examination of Picard's life. After the destruction of the Romulan homeworld, Picard's failed attempt to mount a rescue mission to save them. But then we get a lot of commentary about how the Federation abandoned them and how Starfleet gave in to fear and intolerance, etc., etc. We see that Picard has Romulans working for him on his estate, tending his vineyards, cleaning his house, cooking his meals. But as the plot develops, the whole Romulans are an analog for immigrants in the real world thing pretty much gets discarded as the whole synth plotline takes over. Then there's the Borg, who are also an analog for immigrants in the real world. But the Borg's presence in the story seems largely pointless. Neither the Borg themselves or the former Borg affect the plot in any way. 7 of 9 shows up and does some things. Basically, she kills some unimportant characters. But again, doesn't really do anything that impacts the main plot of the story. Aside from killing Narissa in the final episode. And it could have been any character that did that just as easily. Like Discovery, this show just seems to have too many ideas and plot elements that it's trying to address. These elements are largely underdeveloped or dealt with in a shallow way that leaves a lot of issues unaddressed, and the whole series very unsatisfying. I think this is in part because of the rewrites, but also in part because the writers just aren't that good, or maybe they just don't care. Even the themes explored in the series are muddled and don't make a lot of sense. One of the themes is aging and man confronting his mortality and death. Picard is dying from the aromatic syndrome, but as he's dying, his mind is downloaded into a computer simulation and then placed in a synthetic body. This goes along with Data's statements that it is man's mortality that makes life precious. But if mortality is what makes life worth living, then why extend Picard's life in such an unnatural way by placing his consciousness into an artificial body in the first place? And even more important is the theme of humanity overcoming its flaws to create a utopia on Earth, free of prejudice, crime, hunger, disease, and suffering, then creating the Federation and spreading out into the galaxy, with humanity's motivation now being to learn and better itself. If there's a single idea that could encapsulate what Star Trek The Next Generation was all about, then that was it. In fact, that's the theme of Star Trek as a whole, from the original series in the late 60s to Star Trek Enterprise. We were told repeatedly that we had left our infancy behind and become better beings. But what we learn in Star Trek Picard is, not really. The Federation is basically an illusion. It's more propaganda than anything else. And humans in Star Trek Picard have all kinds of issues. They're still petty, driven by anger, pain, greed, fear, etc. In other words, we really haven't changed. Our technology has advanced, but humans haven't. In other words, Q was right all along. Ever since he first appeared to Picard and accused humanity of being violent savages, or as Q put it, a dangerous child race. Now that, in and of itself, isn't a bad story to tell, but that isn't what Star Trek was about. Star Trek was very much the opposite of that, which leads me to agree with others who say this isn't Star Trek. At least it isn't any Star Trek that I care to see. We still have another season of Star Trek Discovery coming, but hopefully that will be the last of this wretched version of Star Trek that Kurtzman has been peddling for the last 3 years or so. The fact of the matter is that Star Trek is facing other issues other than simply Kurtzman's mismanagement, but that's a subject for another video. For now, I'll just say that I hope this isn't the end of the line for Star Trek, but this show sucks, and I hope this is the last season of Star Trek Picard. When Roddenberry created Star Trek The Next Generation in the 80s, he did something pretty incredible. He caught lightning in a bottle a second time, and the franchise was rejuvenated and went on to enjoy its period of greatest success. Star Trek needs that badly right now, but Roddenberry isn't around anymore to pull off that trick again. Hopefully there's someone out there who can revitalize Star Trek and keep it going forward for years to come, while keeping it consistent with what came before, but I don't know who that would be. Okay, I'll stop there as this video is running long, but before I wrap this up, if you enjoy this content, please hit the like button before you go, and also please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. Also, you can look me up on Twitter @ComicsClassic, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.